Namaste, Namaste from Boston. This is Kanchan Banerjee. I am one of the co-founders of the Boston Center of Excellence and currently working as the managing director of the center. And we welcome you all from all over the world. Today, we have almost 500 people joined from about 60 countries. I'm going to show you the slide that shows the map from around the world. And thank you for joining today. Very special session with some very special people. And this, your participation means a lot to all of us. Not only we are concerned globally, but we also are together globally. And that tells us that humanity is one, and we will win this silent war hopefully very soon. And just a couple of points to make before logistics. Today we are going to have two panelists, and our moderator is Dr. Jay Glaser. And you all are muted. You cannot speak, or you cannot show your video, and you can definitely ask questions. On the panel, you will see a questions section, so you can please text your questions. I would suggest you wait till the panelists speak first and then send the questions. And if you can mention where are you from, which country or which city, that would be also great, so we know where you are. And second thing is, today, as you know, many of you may know that the Indian Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, has requested people in India to light a lamp and pray at 9 p.m. Eastern time for 9 minutes. So those of you who are going to join, please feel free to go and come back after 9 minutes are over. This program is being recorded. You'll have a chance to see the whole recording afterwards as well. So please feel free to join at 9 o'clock Indian time. And we will probably take a quick break at that time, and Dr. Glaser will let you know what we're going to do. And also, I wanted to share with you, as we do in other sessions, about Boston Center of Excellence. And BoCE, we call it, is established to bring together researchers, subject matter experts, practitioners, institutions, and supporters to foster research, program development, education, training, and promotion of yoga and Ayurveda. And the center aims to improve disease outcomes by making yoga and Ayurveda core constituent of integrative health and medicine in the US and worldwide. Now, let me introduce our moderator today, Dr. Jay Glaser. And he is also actually, he's also from Boston area. Dr. Glaser, an MD, board certified internal medicine, practices hospital medicine at University of Massachusetts Health Alliance Hospital, and is on the faculty of the University of Massachusetts Medical School. He is one of the first Western physicians to integrate Ayurveda into his practice, and has published numerous research studies on both Ayurveda and physiology of transcendental meditation. His book, called Body Renewal, The Lost Art of Self-Repair, published by Lotus Press, it discusses the Ayurvedic approach to the most common chronic diseases. With that, let us all welcome Dr. Jay Glaser to moderate this very important session today. Thank you.
Thank you, Kanchan. And I would also like to thank all of the directors and trustees of the Boston Center for Excellence. Not only yourself, Kanchan, and your wife, Hemanti, who does so much work in the background, but also Dr. Balram Singh, our chairman. We're living in an unprecedented moment of time that's shaken the foundations of our societal structure, economics, health systems, and personal connections. Yet, it's a time of great opportunity. Looking to a similar situation in the chronicles of the history of medicine, my mind has gone to the first lines of the Charaka Samhita, which is the principal textbook of internal medicine of Ayurveda and the most comprehensive textbook. In these first lines, there was a convention of physicians, sages, and seers, and they were brought together on the flanks of the Himalayas because of a crisis at that time of the burden of disease and suffering, which was preventing mankind from attending to their higher calling and their higher values. And specifically, they mentioned they weren't able to complete their spiritual practices. Not knowing what else to do, they decided to enter into a group meditation. If you like, to plunge into a collective inward direction, closing their eyes and spending an extended length of time in meditation. And carrying into that meditation a collective wish that they would have a solution to this crisis of medicine. Coming out of meditation, there was a collective thought. We need new knowledge. So they said, who would volunteer to go in the search of that knowledge? And the great physician Bharadwaj volunteered and was appointed. And so begins an exhaustive compendium in the Charaka Samhita of personal and collective conduct and procedures and formulas and classifications of all the possible substances in nature which could have both healing or a toxic effect. Today we find ourselves in a similar situation, with the greater part of humanity in either a mandated or a self-imposed isolation. And we're really in a collective plunge inward, as on the flank of that Himalaya at that time. Of course, we thank the other part of humanity that aren't able to join as completely as the rest of us who are in this inward direction, the caregivers, the people who are in manufacturing and in distribution and in farming and allowing us to keep ourselves healthy. But with this collective plunge inward, we're not only meeting our families sometimes for the first time and able to think of a different direction for ourselves, we really have the opportunity to come out of our months-long meditation inward with a new and enlightened values and structures for society. So we shouldn't miss this opportunity to do this. And I believe that these webinars offered by the Boston Center of Excellence will be an opportunity for us to frame what we want in healthcare as well as in other parts of society. Today, of course, we'll be focused on what we can do as individuals to maintain our personal health as well as the health of our families and communities. So our first speaker today is one of the great physicians who's united East and West, Dr. David Frawley, also known as Pandit Vamadeva Shashtry, is a Vedic teacher, a Vedacharya, and he's the author of 50 books on yoga, Ayurveda, and Vedic studies, translated into 20 languages worldwide. He also writes on current issues, including educational and civilizational concerns relative to India and Vedic culture. He's received a Padma Bhushan, one of the highest civilian awards of the government of India, for his Vedic educational work. and he has a Doctor of Literature from S. Vyasa, the Swami Vivekananda Yoga Anusandhana Samastana. Vamadeva is the director of the American Institute of Vedic Studies in the United States, which offers publications and courses in Vedic knowledge systems. He frequently visits and does programs in India and is associated with Vedic organizations worldwide. And he's been one of the pioneers in the global spread of yoga and Ayurveda over the last several decades. Really, during this course of the time that he's been working, Ayurveda has gone from an unknown entity to what's now really a household word. So thank you for joining us today, Vamadeva, and giving us of your wisdom.
Namaste. Thank you, Jay, and thank you, Kanchan. And thanks also for the Boston Center of Excellence for arranging these types of programs and events, not only for this particular crisis, but as an ongoing contribution to higher education, natural healing, Vedic knowledge in the West. Our format is going to be mainly questions, but each one of us, we will then speak for a short period of time. So I will begin with a short set of statements going on for about 10 minutes or so. And the main issue that I would like to address is immunity overall, and immunity at various levels, individually and collectively. Now, such epidemics, pandemics have happened previously. We've also had destructive wars in the last century. In fact, just recently, we were considering that we'd made it 20 years without major problems in the world. However, there are astrological and other factors after 2020. That's another issue. But we have suddenly entered into this collective crisis. And it begins with, again, this idea of immunity. We have concepts like that in Ayurvedic medicine, like the ojas and the kshamatva, some primary vital energy, genetic strength, or even essence of our tissues, essence of our prana, and our vitality. So we see that such epidemics affect more people with compromised immunity. The elderly, those who have pre-existent health conditions, particularly in the circulatory and respiratory systems. But it also affects the public as a whole. It also affects people who are exposed to this virus more repeatedly. And here specifically, I'm speaking of the healthcare workers. Because the more we're exposed to it, even if we are healthy, we can come down with it as well. So the primary therapy is always to strengthen our immunity. And that is what yoga and Ayurveda offers us. Ayurveda with oils, herbs, dietary recommendations, massage, special factors in each of these areas. Yoga with asana, pranayama, mantra, meditation, Ayurvedic and yogic lifestyles, and more specific medicines and practices that we can address later as needed. Now, that being the case, these yoga Ayurvedic practices are very helpful for everyone. However, when we do come down with an acute condition, we do have to address that in another way with stronger treatments with Ayurveda and yoga. And of course, then also with the treatments of the modern medicine, whatever is required, particularly if any type of medical intervention or hospitalization, ventilators, etc., is required, we must bring together the best in all systems of medicine. Now, with an epidemic, we also have an issue of what we can call collective immunity, not simply individual immunity. And we also see this in the populations. Obviously, certain parts of the community, the elderly, the medically compromised, the overworked, the stressed, will get affected by that. And we have new challenges in collective immunity in our information technological era, in which a virus can hop from airports and suddenly be all over the world, in which there's global communication, in which there are supply chains bringing not only medicines, but food, many other things from different countries back and forth. So we are in a time in which collective immunity is also compromised, and we must bear that in mind. Now, we must also consider we have not only physical immunity, we have psychological immunity, and these two go together. If we have negative attitudes, negative emotions, fear, and panic, that also disturbs the digestive system, disturbs the prana, and disturbs the physical immunity. So it's very important that we also consider and take care of the psychological immunity and the psychological state in dealing with this particular health condition. And this is both, again, at individual and collective levels. Individually, positive attitude, meditation, the mantra, and along with right living overall, proper care of the mind, adequate rest, adequate proper stimulating natural sensory impressions, aromas, so many things. And also collective immunity, addressing the collective stress and strain, creating positive attitudes, maintaining unity of humanity, unity of culture and country, and unity of spirituality is also a very important factor to bear in mind. And here too, with our information technology and the media, there's also kind of a media stress that comes out. We can be overwhelmed by statistics. Often we don't necessarily know what they mean or how accurate they will be. But it's important to maintain a positive collective attitude as well. And that is what Prime Minister Narendra Modi is trying to do on the India side with this particular lighting of a light, lighting of a lamp, to bring this light of collective aspiration to everyone. And we should all maintain an inner flame within our hearts, our inner Agni, sustaining ourselves and sustaining humanity physically, psychologically, and spiritually also through this difficult time frame. Because in addition, there is a collective mind, and we are influenced by the collective mind as well as by our individual minds. In other words, what's going on in society, of course, friends and family, but the society overall, sometimes it's a kind of sense of doom or gloom can affect us. And also it can awaken a deeper spiritual aspiration. Every century has such challenges. This is but our first. If you look back on the 20th century, 2 major world wars, Cold War, Spanish flu, so many things. So we have to be prepared. We have to be resilient. We have to be ready to act both for ourselves and for others, and not just simply retreat. On the other hand, in this condition, we do have to be alone. We need to know how to be alone and project positive thoughts and sustain a positive lifestyle, not just simply watching movies, having tasty food, and getting distracted, but projecting positive thoughts for all of humanity. Now, there are also some broader issues that come up, and what I also like to address to the immunity and integrity of the biosphere, and the ecological issues that we have, highly urbanized lifestyles. We don't always have access to positive air, good food, good water. We can be overstimulated electronically, which can also deplete the nervous system and weaken the immunity. So we should also look at this particular issue as a means of addressing broader psychological and collective issues overall, and the ecological issues of our own personal ecology, which includes the ecology of our digestive system as well as our nervous system, our collective ecology, not only our food and humanity, but how we treat other animals. Animals testing and work with animals by the Chinese brought out this virus to occur, and then creating a collective will to create global health and well-being out of this, which includes the health and well-being of the biosphere and all creatures, not just humanity, but of course, all humanity is extremely important. important. So yoga and Ayurveda address these deeper issues, and also the mind, the brain, the nervous system, consciousness, prana, even simple things, right diet, good herbs, how to breathe, how to deep sleep, yoga nidra. So much help is there at a general level. Some specific herbs and practices can also be helpful, even oil massage, even Svedana, sweating therapy. There's many things that can be done or recommended in this context. But what I wish to do is to kind of create an overview, and then that can be a foundation for more specific questions we have, and for recommendations that are not only physical, but also psychological, spiritual, and perhaps even civilizational. So with these words, I will pass on this webinar to our next very esteemed Dr. Namaste.
Thank you, Vamadeva. So this brings a lot of questions up, certainly to myself. And I was wondering if you might be able to comment. You spoke so eloquently about the idea of community immunity.
Yes.
And I remember this concept when I was a medical student in the 1970s in Colorado. We had I think one of the few cases of polio I've seen in my medical career. It was a young boy, maybe 4 or 5 years old, who lived out in the countryside outside of Denver in a farming community. And he had not been vaccinated against polio, and they were drinking water out of a well. Now, at that time, there was many thousands of kids that were not vaccinated against polio, but this one was drinking water out of a well, whereas the other ones were getting their drinking water from the public water supplies. And I guess this brings into the consciousness the idea of herd immunity, where because the fecal organisms that slowly go through our sewer systems into the rivers from which we get the public water supplies, ultimately even unvaccinated kids would be drinking some of this water and then gaining immunity from the rest, even if they weren't officially vaccinated. So this brings in the idea of herd immunity, as if a whole group of organisms living together gain the immunity. Could you comment about this in the context of what you were talking about from community immunity in Ayurveda?
Yes, I mentioned a collective mind. We also have a collective prana. There's a vital energy that goes back and forth as we speak, as we communicate, as we interrelate in various ways. And we're attuning ourselves to each other, to community, to friends, to society. And in the process, that has a certain genetic effect. Behavior affects genetics, attitude affects genetics. And so that's also affecting a certain part of our immunity. So we could say that the collective mind and collective prana can also share immunity across barriers that are not simply physical. Now, some may be communicated via water or food or other means, but there is an organic response in the human species. And we do see epidemics moving through different communities, and after a certain point going down as the community faces an adaptation, and then it can be passed on to further generations. At the same time, we are in that acute phase where that collective immunity is not totally developed in this case, and we need to emphasize it further with positive activity of our own positive thoughts and even all the other activities we do together.
Good. I see we still have about 5 minutes before the the Diya ceremony in India. With respect to individual immunity, there's thinking commonly that sometimes it might actually be better to expose oneself to more antigens. For example, there's been some research showing that people that work in the garden with their bare hands may actually have better immune systems and more freedom from disease from common bacterial organisms and fungi if they actually get down and get dirty, as if there's an individual immune response coming from that. Is there anything like this that you know of in the Ayurvedic literature?
Well, there's the immune system of the earth. And I have to tell you, I dig the ground with my hands regularly. I do gardening and I will not wear gloves. And I used to say some time ago, it's kind of a joke, I said, I can't trust anybody who doesn't regularly dig the ground. So we are part of that earth. And that earth is the basis of the biosphere. That's where our plants come from. That's where our food comes from. We need to be grounded. In fact, being grounded in nature at a perceptual level, at a daily level, is very important for physical and psychological and even spiritual immunity, to see the sun, the moon, the stars, the clouds, to breathe, to go out, to walk, to hike in nature, to go to the whatever, if you have only a park locally. But to be part of the entire biosphere is a way of connecting to the global prana. And one of our civilizational issues today is we aren't doing that. We are connected to a screen. A screen is two-dimensional and electrical. I am connected to screens quite a bit. I'm of course connected to a screen right now, but we need to compensate for that by moving into those 3 dimensions and embracing the earth, the atmosphere, and even moving beyond into the space of consciousness in which we can share our consciousness with the rest of humanity, other creatures, honor the consciousness in nature, and also ask and request for those energies. The Vedas have all these prayers for universal peace. And these are prayers for peace from the mountains, from the sky, from the waters, not the human peace, which is generally a truce between wars, but a universal peace that is enduring. So there's very much we can do with that. It's very important to energize our medicines, even our herbs, our foods, with these positive prana and positive intentions and thoughts and motivations, because that can take in this higher healing energy that belongs to the entire universe, that comes from the earth and the plants, and that goes directly to us and all humanity. That pranic dimension is not just physical, it is also spiritual. So let us please remember that and keep that in our daily activity.
Good. We're about a couple of minutes away from the candle lighting and 9 minutes of silence and meditation without electricity in India. So I think this would be an appropriate time to take a moment and to join in this. And so what I would like to do for those who don't have a candle nearby is light one for us collectively. And with this lighting of the light, I would like to invoke the idea of spreading this light of knowledge of Ayurveda and yoga everywhere in the world. Yoga is typically thought of as something that's practiced more in the darkness, in the quiet, and the Vedas with the fire and the light is more the part of the light. But we do talk about the light of yoga. And with this lighting of the light, joining with the other people in the world who are doing this today, I'd like to symbolically have this light come out from this group collectively today, from the Boston Center of Excellence to all other areas of the world, to all people who are joining in our goal to bring this light of knowledge to all mankind, that we will structure new ways of thinking, new ways of creating personal and community values for ourselves. So with this, I'd also like to have everybody take 1 minute of simply closing the eyes and doing a meditation. And then I'll ask everybody to open the eyes and we'll continue again. Let's open our eyes.
Jay?
Yes.
Yes. Agni, of course, is the central concept of yoga and Ayurveda. Agni, this flame in the heart, the highest Agni, Pranagni, Jataragni. So let us all energize that Agni of yoga, Ayurveda, enlightenment, ultimate healing, and let us have that pervade our discussion and join with this great light coming out of India, which is connected to the universal light. Om Hum Agnaye Swaha.
Beautiful. Continuing, perhaps you can tell us in this specific discussion that you were bringing about. We're talking about Ojas and the development of immunity, this creation of a substance that is part substance and part consciousness that we call Ojas, that is playing such a great role in immunity. It's the finest essence of all the dhatus, the tissues. Perhaps, Vamadeva, you could tell us about the role of Agni, the fire, the fires in the dhatus and the digestive fires in creating Ojas.
Yes, that's a very, very important consideration. Ojas, as you mentioned, is the essence of the dhatus, what we call the tissues in the broader sense, of which there's 7, the plasma, blood, muscle, fat, bone, nerve, reproductive. And there's a system of digestion that goes up from the digestive fire, digesting food. Each dhatu has its own Agni. And the ultimate essence of that Agni and that digestive process is the Ojas, which is said to be a kind of very fine, kind of oily substance, a few drops in the heart, but it actually pervades our entire being, physical being, even psychological being overall. It connects to our congenital strength, a kind of a built-in Ojas we have from birth that's built in at a dhatu on a cellular level as well. It's even connected to karmic factors. So we need to have a proper Agni as the digestive fire, as the dhatu fire, to build up the Ojas and to digest it, digest the factors, building it up properly. And we also find that Ojas becomes the vehicle for Agni at a deeper level. Ojas holds the prana, Ojas holds also what we call the Tejas, which is the essence of all the Agnis. It becomes the inner support of immunity, and that higher prana from the Ojas allows for our healing at a deeper level to occur. And that higher Agni or Tejas from the Ojas allows for our immune responses like fever, body temperature, internal warmth, and internal healing. So at a deeper level, Ojas and the Agni and Prana connected to us are the key to deep healing and rejuvenation, and also supporting the immune system, and also supporting our mental immunity, giving us patience, peace of mind, endurance, confidence, fearlessness, and all the rest of it. So the higher Agni rests upon the Ojas as the fuel, and that pure Ojas can keep going this higher Agni of healing and transformation and spirituality, Yogagni within.
So in this context, we have a lot of people who are feeling kind of cooped up at home, not doing their usual exercise, perhaps not going to work, not involving their physiology as they usually do, maybe eating differently, maybe sitting around the home and eating more. What should these people be doing in this consideration to keep the different digestive and tissue agnis strong so that their immune system will continue to be strong?
Yes, very simple things. They're the simple common spices, ginger, turmeric, cloves, cardamom, which we find in the Ayurvedic cooking quite a bit. There are also simple teas, tulsi, even ginger, cinnamon, that keep the peripheral movement of the Agni in the circulatory system. Exercise is necessary, and of course yogic exercise is fine. Pranayama is necessary. You can even visualize enkindling the digestive fire when you do your pranayama practices. There's certain mantras like Hum or Hrim that help connect to the Agni. And you can, if you can't look at the sun, you can at least visualize the solar light, connect to the solar light, have a candle inside the house. The trataka, or the gazing at the candle, can be a helpful factor. Visualizing the Agni within you, not only the digestive fire, but the flame of consciousness and awareness, the Agni of the Jivatma, or the individual soul that dwells within the heart. So many things can be done. And remember that you are Agni, Agni is part of you, and Agni pervades all. We live in a user-friendly universe. If we ask, we can receive, but we must ask with respect and humility, and then the universal consciousness will give us the blessing or the grace. Let us remember the well-being that is inherent in being and pervades all.
Good. Well, I'd like to continue with our next speaker, and then I'm sure that Vamadeva and Dr. Mehta will both be able to introduce more knowledge. I notice also that we're, as far as I can tell, we're not getting many questions yet from all those 60 countries out there that are involved in the webinar today. So please send your questions, because we have two great Vedic scholars and people and individuals that are very much involved in integrative medicine that can answer your questions today. And we'd love to hear from what part of the world these questions are coming from. So before we introduce Dr. Mehta, I'd like to turn back to Kanchan Banerjee from the Boston Center for Excellence.
Namaste again. Just a couple of quick sort of announcements. This event is also co-sponsored by the Computer Society of India. They have thousands of members globally, and Pramit Makode, who is also board member of Boston Center, co-founder, and he is also the vice president of the North American zone. So he has also shared this information with the members. Thank you. One quick disclaimer that the discussion today we are having or in future webinars, these are all educational and informational. And if you have a situation that you need medical help, please do contact your own medical service provider, and also follow the rules and regulations that are set by your country's government and the local governments. So please, follow the basic rules like staying home and other things that are, regulated by different countries and governments. And lastly, I wanted to mention that this is a weekly webinar we are offering from Boston Center, and this is the third one in this series in this pandemic era, and we will continue to have these events every week as long as we can. I just wanted to mention the upcoming events. So next one will be on Saturday, not a Sunday, because next Sunday is Easter Sunday. So we wanted to avoid a conflict. So I'm going to share the screen. The next Saturday session is here. This is again two great experts from US. Both of them are from US. Dr. Satbir Singh Khalsa at Harvard Medical School. He is a long-time researcher on yoga and meditation. And Dr. Shalini Val, she's from University of Massachusetts Amherst, and she's a professor of business, but she uses mindfulness in business, in education, and community development. So there will be great speakers. And the following week, which will be a Sunday again at the same time, 11 a.m. Eastern time, we'll have a special session on arts. There'll be three artists, happens to be all of them are from Boston area. So Vandana Sharma, Gopika Narula, and Lucilda Cooper. They'll be actually talking about, as Dr. Glaser mentioned, we're staying home, kids are home. What are the things we can do? So one is art, and while we are home, we can do some drawing, some painting. So these three artists are going to help us to start our passion for painting. So please stay tuned, and I will hand it back to Dr. Glaser, and I'm going to post the registration link on the chat box for next Saturday this coming Saturday program, so you can register. And if you have any questions, send an email to info@theboce.org. And if you have any feedback or any suggestion for a topic or is a speaker, an expert, please let us know. Thank you. Back to Dr. Glaser.
Good. So our next speaker is Darshan Mehta, MD. Dr. Mehta is an assistant professor of medicine at the Harvard Medical School, and he's the medical director at the Benson Henry Institute for Mind-Body Medicine at the Mass General Hospital. And he's the educational director of the Osher Center for Integrative Medicine at the prestigious Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, as well as at the Harvard Medical School. His educational and research interests include curricular development in complementary and integrative medical therapies, mind-body educational interventions in health professions, training and promotion of professionalism in medical training. Dr. Mehta sees patients in a consultative role for the use of complementary and integrative medical therapies, as well as mind-body interventions for stress management and stress reduction at the Mass General Hospital. And he's active in the Massachusetts Medical Society and the American College of Physicians. And he's a diplomate of the American Board of Integrative Medicine. So I'm going to turn over to Dr. Mehta.
Well, good day, everyone, and thank you for having me here. We really want, I think this again is an opportunity for us as a community as the human community to really get together and understand what can we do to really relieve the shared burden that we feel. And at the same time, how can we use this as an opportunity to raise our sense of collective well-being? Again, as Dr. Frawley mentioned earlier, this really spans from the level of the individual to the level of the ecosystem. And I want to just say from the outset, I don't profess that I'm an expert in any of this, except to say that I'm a student. And this is a whole new a time for learning for all of us. It's a time for deep reflection. And I'll speak to a couple of things that I think are just important to highlight amongst, at least as it relates particularly to healthcare providers, but then also thinking about what does it mean for us as a community of human beings from across the world. So I want to just take a step back and just really speak first directly to healthcare providers. We know that healthcare providers, especially in the United States, but this is true and the only reason we know in the United States is just that they've been more studied, but across the world are at tremendous risk of multiple conditions, which is collectively termed in this word called burnout. And it's a syndrome that's characterized by exhaustion, cynicism, reduced effectiveness. And I think one of the things, this isn't going to be surprising to some of you, in a time like this, these syndromes that are already there under the surface, they're already there, are even more exacerbated. And we see that through what we hear on the media. We perhaps have experienced directly, some of you, or know somebody who has that. It is a important phenomenon to recognize, not to say that that they're unable to do their work. I think many healthcare providers, and again, amongst that, the most well-studied population has really been physicians, are still quite resilient and skilled at doing their work. And my truly, my hats go off to those who are right now at the front lines. But let's just recognize the tremendous amount. If the underlying substrate is already at disadvantaged in some ways, these types of stressors only will exacerbate that. So, and again, when we think about what are the things that can happen, again, we think about on the personal level, depression, alcohol, substance use, relationships, difficulty in relationships, to decrease quality of care and medical errors, patient satisfaction, turnover. And again, and the most sort of consequential of this, again, especially amongst healthcare providers, is thinking about, especially around suicide and healthcare provider suicide. This is a real phenomenon that is very much present across the, particularly in the United States, but across the world. So I think one of the things that we have to think about is a values-driven approach to healthcare. And again, there is obviously a tremendous work that is being done at understanding treatment, and that includes pharmacologic treatment, as well as how does that pharmacologic treatment work in conjunction with other types of treatment that are, again, known or potentially can be extracted through the wisdom, especially in Ayurvedic tradition. So there's that level of work. But then there is also the level of work that we need to do on thinking about at the community level and society level, and at the as again Dr. Frawley really spoke so eloquently about at the unit.
Somehow you are muted. Hold on. Yeah, you should speak now.
Okay, I went offline
Yeah,
just for a
we
moment.
can.
Okay, I'm back on. Sorry about that. So again, one of the things again to think about is how do these again how do we go from the individual level again at the level of treatment from pharmacology to the level of healing at the level of both the individual to the level of the society. So part of it is helping us really create a culture of wellness. And this, again, the culture of wellness really has to extend from the individual level to the systems level, to the community level, to the society level. And again, as Dr. Frawley beautifully talked about, we really have to think about this very holistically. It also is the way in which we interact with our own selves, looking within, to the ways in which we interact with others, looking, to each other for support. Now, again, technology is important as it may facilitate some of this, but we cannot be dependent on it. We have to think about other ways of connection that, again, is important to have technology support. Just early this morning, I was on a Zoom conference call with my family members from India and across the United States, and we connected, and it was a beautiful moment we can connect. But that won't be a substitute down the road for a real human connection. And so we have this opportunity of creating that fertile ground for building connection. And this also will support those that are doing the frontline work because they will be part of a fabric that really scaffolds them against some of the ravages that had already been present in the healthcare professions. And again, I think that's where our some of the approaches that are offered and so beautifully written about in the yogic traditions and in obviously in the old ancient texts in Ayurveda can really support. But some of the things I just want to begin to sort of think about is really how do we shift perspective? That's going to be important for us. And I'm just going to raise a couple of issues before I sort of pause and get a chance to work. Thinking about how do we build creativity? How do we continue to think about our nutrition in healthy ways that involve both our community, family, and at the individual level? And then finally, how do we think about social connectedness? And lastly, how do we think about nutrition? I'm sorry, how do we think about movement and exercise? And again, these are such important domains. We know that all of this is important for health and well-being from the individual to the community level. So I will pause there and we'll go, yeah.
Good. Thank you very much, Dr. Mehta. A couple of questions come to mind, and we have questions also from the group. How do we all find that unless we're completely and totally isolating ourselves, that we need to go do simple things, from something as simple as going to a grocery store or something as difficult as going into a room who's been found to have a positive test for COVID-19. we all want to be able to maintain our equanimity in the face of adversity, and yet at the same time be able to maintain a very healthy perspective of caution. How does yoga and Ayurveda allow us to think about that situation where we want to be calm, easy, and yet cautious at the same time?
So I think a couple of things come to mind immediately. One is if you think, just how our society in general, again, I can speak mostly from a US perspective, but is that when we have these sort of moments, when the panic sets in society, from a society perspective, you can see certain behaviors that, so for example, the question really needs to be asked, how much food do you need, right? We get into this behavior of like, okay, I need to stockpile. I need to sort of put it, and as if we will be encountering a shortage of food. We won't have food available to us for the next 6 months or a year or something, and people begin to do this type of behavior. And again, that's really, again, when we step back and take perspective, you think like, well, is that really important? How important is that? Secondly, we think about, well, what is the plan of action moving forward? So again, I would, again, Dr. Frawley, as he spoke again beautifully about tending to the garden, being connected to nature, thinking about do we even have spaces? Again, I hope this type of environment makes us think about our own foods. And do we even create our own food to help sustain? And again, those are certain practices that we've let go of because of just the industrialization of food and how readily available. And I myself am no different than most people, but just thinking about that, that's just something like, what is our relationship to food, both as an individual and as a society? As it relates to thinking about like, practices, again, some of these practices we know have, again, both of being, what does it mean to be healthy practices, as well as what allows us to build immunity. When it dealing with patient care, and we think about protective equipment and all, yes, all of that is important. There's no question, because we haven't built the immunity. And the question is, how do you keep yourself safe and then safely build your immunity? And those are two processes that have to happen in parallel at this point in time. And again, for healthcare providers particularly, there's no question in my mind that we need to, sort of have these types of equipment in place, personal protective equipment, because it allows us to do the work that we need to do to take care of the patients that are undoubtedly suffering from this condition. So the equanimity comes from really being in that space of service. Again, there is a lot of tragedy. And again, for many of us who are not used to sort of seeing or dealing with that tragedy on such a front, in such a direct manner, it is difficult. And that's where, again, our communities become very important fabrics for us to be able to process, whether that's your professional community, your spiritual community, etc. But the idea of community is the scaffold from which you can actually hold these burdens, is to me a fundamental part. And again, I can speak to our community locally at Mass General. What are things that we're trying to do or build community amongst our providers? Now, the last thing I'll just say, it's very tough to do this in the face of when you're dealing with the acute stressor and all of a sudden saying, oh, here's how you quote. You don't want someone to feel like they're made to relax, but rather you're providing space, that knowing that there is a space there that can hold them should they choose to use it. The challenge for most healthcare providers is they don't choose to use these spaces. And it's just part of, again, the culture in which we rotate. So it requires a certain amount of humility to say that, you know what, I can lean on my fellow human being. And that, again, can allow that sort of rejuvenating, and I would argue a protective spirit to emerge. It's a collective immunity that builds.
Good. We have a few questions already coming from around the world. There's a question that's specifically directed to Pundit Vamadeva Shashtry. This participant writes, this virus has a short incubation period. How can one improve one's ojas in a short period of time? Can you suggest some specific things to do so?
Yes, obviously ojas is the product of time, and it cannot be built up overnight. So again, we have to have a long-term strategy to deal with immunity. And this sustaining immunity and ojas should be a primary strategy for all of us in dealing with all of our diseases in life. We shouldn't just wait until we have an acute condition to do that. Proper nutrition is very important. There is in Ayurveda a whole set of ojas building herbs like ashwagandha, shatavari, bala. There are formulas like chavanprash. There are oils like balashwagandha. But mostly nutritional things take time to get into the system. In Ayurveda, we say it takes 35 days for the complete digestion of food into the different tissues or dhatus. So what I would say in that condition, it's best to maintain the good pranayama, good circulation, mild sweating therapies, we say, and more diaphoretic type herbs, cinnamon, ginger. There are a whole set of sage. There's all the mints and other things like that to keep your circulation and the peripheral circulation. You know, you come down with a cold. Come down with a cold, which means your peripheral circulation is broken, which means your peripheral pranic sphere is broken. So as long as you maintain that circulation of prana through the breath and through certain type of these diaphoretic and circulatory stimulant herbs, that will help you sustain a more immediate immunity when you're being exposed, and these will have a more immediate action. At the same time, you do sustain the long-term nutritional factors to increase ojas. Above all, sustain deep sleep, sleep well, which means sleeping early and rising early. And do exercise to move the energy so that your energy doesn't become stagnant. Energy becomes stagnant, prana becomes stagnant, outside forces can come in. Physical activity and also pranayama, pranic movement also helps to do that. Balance the prana through alternate nostril breathing. Many things can be done, but those are a few kind of helpful recommendations. So long-term support of ojas, short-term moving and sustaining of the prana, and then if a more severe medical case comes up, we do have to deal with the medical providers and what we have accessible to us and what seems to be working today. Namaste.
Good. In continuing along that line of questioning, we have a question from Japan. Hello, I'm from Japan. What practices can we do if we caught the virus? It sounds like it's somebody who perhaps has the virus, does not need to be hospitalized. Otherwise, she probably wouldn't be, or he probably wouldn't be asking the question, is at home trying to recover. What can one do in that case? And maybe that comes along together with another question. From New Jersey, Angela writes, traditionally spring is a time of cleansing. Is that still good to do during this time? Is it best to follow a kapha pacifying diet and lifestyle practices? And I'm bringing this question together because the manifestations of acute COVID-19 infection usually are respiratory that might require kapha pacification.
I think we should direct this question to Dr. Mehta first, because I think he is more connected to what is happening on the ground level there.
Well, I'll just add, I think from practices, again, once you have, if you have the virus, then obviously it is going to be important for you to really take rest. Okay, that's the most important thing. I think we try oftentimes think about doing a lot and trying to do too much, and the most important thing is really to focus on it's an opportunity for just sort of inward practice, reflection, the mind-body practices that have been shown, again, through now many approaches, different approaches, but also sort of universally showed that have a stress reduction component as measured even by hormonal tests, as well as epigenetics and such. So I think those things are going to be important. Again, as is known by many people, this is because of the newness of this, there isn't much evidence. So everything I'm saying is really from either my own clinical experience or belief, supported by perhaps experience with other conditions, as well as just thinking about what would make sense physiologically. So again, knowing that the coronavirus, again, when it's in the sort of, it goes right to the lungs, and there is what they call a cytokine storm in the later stages that happen, which affects the ways in which the oxygenation or sort of air exchange happens, sort of in the deeper parts of your lung, the lower parts of the lung. I think one thing that makes sense to me is to have sort of the deep diaphragmatic style, deep breathing practices to keep your alveoli fully expanded and allowing that type of it. So the more you're able to practice that, many people do describe a shortness of breath or wheezing that happens. And again, these practices, we know when you do these types of practices, also like when you think about lessons learned from conditions like asthma or chronic obstructive pulmonary, like those are things that we know also help. So I'm using sort of a parallel experience from other practices. I think some of the more gentle movement-based practices, again, taking from the sort of, I know we're talking here about Ayurveda and yoga, but again, we can draw parallels from approaches like Tai Chi that have sort of a very, again, grounded approach, centered, and again, paying attention inward to the body, but also really expanding what we don't want is to have sort of dead volume of the lung. And so really having as much of the air exchange possible. Beyond that, sleep, I think, again, Dr. Frawley mentioned eloquently, sleep is very important, and there's no substitute for sleeping well. And then finally, I would say, again, I'll defer to some of the specifics of the dietary piece, but again, continuing to really maintain, I think probably as is the case oftentimes with many of, not to over, focus, so like have too many calories, but perhaps less is more here, but to stay sort of nutritionally sort of in equanimity or in balance, but not to sort of focus on, I need to get a lot of calories. If you over ingest, I think that may perhaps do more harm in the end, especially if you have increased carbohydrate content because of the way the CO2 is produced from carbohydrates. And again, I think that can impair some of the gas exchange down the road. So again, these are just conjectures, but more just lessons learned from other conditions.
Yes, I would like to add something here. We also have to maintain proper hydration. Sipping regularly warm water with ginger, turmeric, cinnamon, tulsi, because the more we maintain that hydration, that also lubricates the lungs. In Ayurveda, we also use a lot of these Ayurvedic massage oils that are based usually on the sesame oil base, but they bring in other herbs, whether it's karpa or camphor, or whether it is like something like balashwagandha, because the immune system also connects to the skin. So proper hydration to the skin via oils, massage can also help. Generally, and proper hydration via the herbs and the beverages that we are taking during the day. And also consider the role of Vata dosha, because there's a lot spread through the air. And also it has a deeper level of disturbance. And also, even to some extent, infection, you have to consider pitta a little bit, whenever a fever arises. So whenever the fever arises, then you have to more specifically deal with an anti-fever approach. So watch the body temperature, and then then you'll have to go into more specific treatments as the febrile disease continues. But if the fever is not there, you can do these more general practices.
Good. We have a couple of other questions I think that go together as well. Michael from Boston writes, how do we manage watching, listening to news in order to stay informed without being overwhelmed by the negativity? And this goes together as well with a question from Romania. I'd like to ask if there are any particular ways in which we can keep control of our anxieties and drive them away in this time of crisis, other than nutrition, as that can take longer than needed. Is there a quick or a highly efficient way of keeping our mental health in check?
So I can offer just a couple of just quick thoughts. Again, I think as it relates to the news cycle, yes, again, our bodies were not built to have sort of 24/7 updates. This is not, human beings never existed that way physiologically. Again, so to have that constant stressor present is, again, it's definitely damaging. Again, you have to balance it with the need to stay informed. So I would recommend, picking a very set period of time where you are able to engage with the news, and then after that, really creating sort of a limit among that. So I think whatever, and I think it's similar to what we do for children. We have sort of limit the amount of screen time. I think we're no different, again, as we get as adults. The other thing I will just, again, was already mentioned previously, but I'll just re-emphasize, the screens that are built today are very different than perhaps the screens that some of us grew up on. So the fact that there's this is really LED light and everything is LED has actually and this has been researchers at the Brigham where I'm based have shown this beautifully over the years now, that this is blue light that emanates from all of our screens, whether it's our phones, tablets, computers, TVs, and the light bulbs around us do affect our melatonin production. So it affects sleep. And I will be the first to say that as I've shifted in my own practice from a face-to-face to now a virtual visit, I'm on screens way more than I've ever intended to be. And it has definitely affected my sleep. It has definitely affected just, I've actually have to now rethink this, and this is true for a lot of people. So I just wanted to sort of bring awareness to those things as it relates to just the constant news cycle, because those can also heighten, the physiology can heighten the underlying anxiety. I think it's important to stay socially connected. We may be physically distant, but socially connected. And again, connected again inwardly and externally. And again, perhaps returning back to some of the roots of writing that we historically engaged in, and maybe shifting away from typing and maybe moving back to writing a little bit more. I'm not saying everything has to be, but a little bit more shifting. I think this is a shift, moving to calling people on the phone again, rather than rather than being on the screen with them. But again, engaging with it. And then again, I would just say there are other things that we know help our general psyche. Music, arts, again, are very much part of our cultural ethos, especially, and has been written in, again, especially in the Vedic thoughts about the importance of the arts as a part of a healing practice in these sort of stressful moments. And I think those are the things that we can, again, return to and connect to.
Yeah, just a few practical points following up here. One, we should shut the screens off a few hours before we go to sleep. We shouldn't listen to the news about the virus as the last thing. Take at least 2 hours, and in that period, you can do some pranayama, some meditation, go out into nature, take your tea, whatever it is you need to detoxify and allow the mind to empty itself out. Mind will detoxify if you emptied itself out, so that when you go to sleep at night, even you can use a mantra, that sleep will be deep. And again, to sleep early. This will make a difference. Shut the media off. And at the same time, when you get up in the morning, take also some time, if possible. I know many people are working, etc. But to not turn on the news first thing in the morning, but open up to some positive impressions and energies and meditation and yoga and all of that. Don't have your life be circumscribed by the media. Here I also have a kind of personal statement. There's a kind of almost what I say statistical fear mongering that goes on, where you see graphs going to the sky relative to cases, relative to deaths, relative to all of these things. We have to understand statistics in their own environment, and we should not just, react simply according to rising statistics. This is an issue. There are very great dangers, but there are things that we can do, and we must maintain a positive attitude. And we must also be informed and see what is actually going on where we are, what we can do, and not let ourselves be overwhelmed by news and numbers. There are, 7.8 billion people on this planet. There are, 350 million Americans. There's 1.3 billion Indians. So let's also consider the broader, longer scope of things. Anxiety is mainly Vata dosha. So we also deal with that with proper nutrition, grounding, rest, communication, and sharing. Community, as Dr. Mehta was saying, actually relating to other people, even by phone, whatever it is that you have to do, sustaining our human, natural, and cosmic connections in this time of crisis, and also envisioning a better future for all of us as we come out of this problem.
Good. We also have a question from our chairman of the Boston Center for Excellence, Dr. Singh. What is the astrological phenomenon that Dr. Frawley was mentioning for 2020? Vamadeva, it sounds like you had perhaps a prediction for the Jyotish chart of the world for this year.
Okay, that is a technical question. I actually wrote over 10 years ago that I saw 2020 as marking a more difficult time for humanity. I put up a version of that article in December, but I also was shocked as to how 2020 has come in. And without getting into the technicalities, first of all, we do have to consider that we are connected to the universe as a whole and to the solar system. I know many do not regard astrology to be scientific. Astrology is one of the branches or aspects of the Vedic system. And there are various movements going on astrologically. And I'll just put a few simple things out there, because again, I don't want to overwhelm people with the technology and the techniques that are involved. The winter solstice has been at the point of the galactic center, which is the center of the galaxy, a place of karmic transformation. And right now, the lunar nodes, what we call Rahu and Ketu, the points of eclipses are also on the angle where the Ketu, the southern node, is crossing the galactic centers. It is a point of transformation, and all the planets between Rahu and Ketu is something called the Kalasarpa Yoga, but it's a condition that causes global unrest. It's used a lot in the mundane astrology, and more specifically, Rahu, the north node of the moon, which is the indicator of these issues epidemic-wise, is crossing a very sensitive point opposite the galactic center in Gemini, in Ardra, which is a place of storm, which is a place and also representing the lungs. And the planets are under the domination of a kind of a backward effect of Rahu. So these were some of the factors I'm looking at. We do annual charts for the new moon in Pisces for the different countries of the world. And that was just recently, I think, March 24th, 25th. So there were some dangerous things. For example, the north node of the moon was rising in Gemini in the Italian chart, for example, for that particular day. So we saw specific stress there. Complicated thing. I don't want to go into the technicalities here again. I've written some articles on that. I also don't want to create any kind of fear psychosis because of the stars. But it is important that these same forces that are drawing us or causing these health problems globally can also at a deeper level cause us to awaken, like a warning, and take better care of our health, our environment, and better usage of the technology. So far, we have developed a new technology, but we haven't developed the consciousness to use it in the best possible way for human beings. And this is relative not only to the technology, but also to the media. So let's take this as a wake-up call from nature that we need to improve our civilization in a more dharmic way, in a more natural way, and use technology for our inner benefit and not simply be dominated and controlled by technology. Let's put technology in the context of our greater spiritual welfare and well-being, which is our connection with the universe as a whole and our respect for the whole of nature. And our human body is our earth, is our nature. We must protect and honor the organic basis of our human body. We cannot just treat the body as a machine or through drugs. So these are some of the issues to come up. But I would also say that I do see the situation improving, and I don't think we should get into a panic mode. We should get into a mode of improvement, help, alliance, coming together and sharing. There is within the human being, a cosmic being, our inner self that transcends time and space. We can also bring that divine essence better into our lives, and this is a great opportunity to bring that into our lives and into our relationships.
Good. We also have to change direction to a more physiological one. We have a question from Liz from the UK, who's asking about the possibility of doing cleansing now. Maybe I should put that question in context. There are many Ayurvedic techniques that involve cleansing, from just a daily cleansing to a more extended one, such as panchakarma and so forth. Cleansing usually involves breaking down the body, doing some intensive cleansings, purgations, laxatives, sweating, bloodletting in cases, which breaks down the body, and then with the idea of building it back up. So I think the question is that good to do now for the promotion of better immunity, or is it better not to take the risk of finding oneself weakened after doing a cleansing, and it's better to stay simply pacifying the doshas as they come up?
Dr. Mehta, you want to address that?
So again, I think it will depend on sort of where you are. So from a in the sense of stage of illness. So I think from a prevention perspective, I think again, nothing should change. For those of you who are really thinking about like, what do I do to optimize my sense of health and well-being to prevent against, then of course, as it relates to following the practice that are consistent with your constitutional type makes sense. So that would be from a prevention perspective. The question will become what happens when, if you have it and how sick you are, and that part is still, very frank, is still quite unknown. So for example, there's a tremendous amount of debate on whether or not, for example, those of you who say do intermittent fasting, there's been quite a bit of suggestion that, again, with like the common cold, what can help reduce the severity and length of symptoms for a common cold, and do you continue your intermittent fasting? Those of you who practice that as part of your sort of health maintenance. And again, I tend to, as I mentioned earlier, I think again, in these early stages, probably less is more, again, maintain balance and healthy, but not increasing caloric intake. is probably most important. But again, as it relates to the specifics, I'll pass it to you, Dr. Frawley.
Yes, we would not recommend panchakarma at this time, particularly virechana, and anything of those kind of severe things at this time, because these tend to weaken the immunity, and particularly for types like Vata dosha. So this is not a time for panchakarma. At the same time, some of the snehana swedana, the oil therapy, and the sweating therapy is helpful, particularly the sweating therapy. We don't want to get too much oil into kapha types or even pitta types, or kapha may cause some congestion. For Vata dosha, we can have more of that. I also mentioned earlier this kind of diaphoretic, a mild sweat producing ginger, cinnamon, sage, tulsi type herbs to maintain the circulation. That is good to do. If you have ama in the system, however, if you have a thick tongue coating, that's showing that you do have toxins there, you do want to remove those as best you can without stressing the system with kind of long fasting or that sort of thing. Lighter diet, and make sure don't take heavy meals in the evening. That's what a lot of the Indian population likes to do. You have to deal in proper spices, proper food as per your dosha to keep the ama out of the system, so that toxic buildup of undigested food matter doesn't block the channels and interfere with the disease process that can go on. You might say, again, the mild palliation type therapies. And particularly if it's more high kapha, there might be a little bit of that cleansing and fasting going on. But again, make sure you have good energy and good ojas, and that is the primary consideration at this particular time. Strengthen ojas, and the more longer term or deeper detox is better to do at a later time after this particular problem has moved on. That is at least how I would look at it, and particularly for anyone who is depleted the proper nutrition. And a lot of these problems are happening with the elderly who are in limited environments, rest homes, etc. A lot needs to be done with them for the fresh air, for the proper circulation, and for the proper positive support.
Good. Along this same line, we have a question regarding whether one should be taking raw foods, which we know from the Ayurvedic texts require a much stronger Agni, and which may be, if we don't have that strong Agni, may promote the accumulation of inner toxins from the undigested food. Would it be better for people to stick with better cooked foods as opposed to more salads and raw foods at this time?
Well, first of all, it is springtime where you do have a lot of fresh greens. And I think those are helpful to have in the diet, spinach, etc. It may be better to cook them. And I think a certain percentage of the diet can be raw, depending upon the doshic type, maybe less for Vata, up to larger amounts for Kapha and Pitta. But overall, I would not recommend people going on a raw food diet, because that is also very cooling to the system. And what is cooling, it may be helpful for, say, for a Pitta person, but overall, the virus, etc., these problems come in when we don't have the proper heat or Agni in the system. So I would say it's best to be careful with the raw food, not a raw food diet. Some raw food can be taken, and even some juices at times can be taken as well. But for ojas, we recommend basically a nutritive diet that is more anti-Vata in nature. But again, watch the ama. If there's more of the ama there, ama is better reduced by some of the spices and even sipping ginger tea, other things, than simply by taking the raw food. Raw foods also of different types. Radishes can be a little bit more stimulating. So we do want to make sure that the food is not overly cooked either. If your fruit, vegetables, all of that, cauliflower, broccoli, etc., should only be just cooked as needed, maintain the prana in the food, but a good grounding of whole grains, even the mung beans are very good, the khichdi is very good. You want to maintain a fairly even diet, avoid the junk food, the sugars, the oily, greasy food, kind of the common sense things. I would say overall, if you're mainly inside, have a lighter diet than you normally would because you're not expending so much. Also have regular meals, and again, don't eat heavy food after the sunset, and have your main meal more towards the noontime. These, I think, are some helpful recommendations on that topic.
Good. We also have a number of questions regarding the use of vibration and mantra and other practices. Sylvia from Slovakia and Lori from Terrytown are asking also questions in this regard, perhaps mantras that are more specific for healing, or specific practices that would allow one to use one's prior development of consciousness through yoga and meditation to create inner health.
Yes, well, I actually have a whole book on mantra called Mantra Yoga and Primal Sound, but there are certain healing bija mantras that are very helpful overall. Even a simple mantra like Shrim, Shrim is positive health and well-being. Shrim is the force of Lakshmi. Shri is swasti, well-being, swasta. It also increases the more positive kapha, ojas energies. Or we have another bija, Hrim, very similar, Shrim with the Sha and Hrim with the Ha. Hrim is the bija mantra of the heart, of the circulation, of the solar energy, and of increasing the prana and the circulation overall. So there are specific bijas. There's the bija mantra Hum, which is said to be the Varma bija, or the protective force for pushing out negative energies. And there are simple mantras, Om Shanti, or even the mantra Sham for creating calm and well-being. And we also say, you know, you have a mantra for a guru or a devata, what we call Ishta Devata, mantra for your Ishta Devata, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, all these, so many Devi mantras are there. These are also good to do because the mantra keeps the mind circulating. It stops any collection of negative emotions in the subconscious mind. And it can also be aligned with the prana for aligning mind and prana. So it aids with all the positive attitudes involved. Many of you have special mantras you've been given by your guru, by your tradition, by a meditation practice. So it's also good to use the mantras you have been using because these are energized already, and just add the extra dimension of intention or sankalpa for the healing purpose. And you can circulate the mantra throughout the body. You can circulate it throughout the mind. You can connect it to the sun, the moon, the pranic forces. These are more yogic type practices, but mantras there, it raises the vibration of the chitta, the mind stuff overall. And that also raises the vibration of the prana and also helps raise the vibration down to a cellular level. I know we can't claim this is scientifically proven, but it's something we can experience for ourselves. So these aspects of mantra leading to meditation, of course, the silent mind has some of the ultimate powers of healing. That is why deep sleep is so healing. So being able to take your mind back to silence, create space for your mind. Don't be a two-dimensional mind. Be a three-dimensional mind expanding into the space of infinity. And then these pranic Shakti healing forces can develop within us. So we need to open again ourselves to the greater pranic forces of nature. And we can do this without giving up or ignoring the proper medical health and other advice that we should be following, because the fact is right now each one of us should have plenty of time, and that time we should put forth for healing purposes of body and mind, nature, planet, and spiritual connections.
Very good. We appreciate that. While we're talking about pranic forces, there were a number of questions from around the world. Ellie, as well as Carol from Tasmania, were asking about which specific pranayams will stronger pranayam practices risk bringing viruses in deeper to the lungs. And specifically, Ellie was wondering about whether doing more forceful Kapalbhati or Bhastrika pranayams would be better, something that might have a cooling effect. You comment on these questions about specific pranayams.
Well, to kind of address that in a general way, things like the Bhastrika and the stronger ones are good to do initially or short-term for clearing out the system and improving the circulation. They don't need to be done long-term or continually. For long-term, we just recommend the basic alternate nostril breathing. You can also figure out which of these breaths may be blocked in you and emphasize that side. And also to do more alternate nostril breathing more on the right side in the morning and on the left side before you go to sleep. And to deepen the prana, deepen and slow down the prana, and also to have positive thoughts along with the prana. What are you breathing in? What are you holding in with your thoughts? These should also be positive and transformational. Do not use personal ego effort, but use a deeper relaxation and surrender to the higher pranic energies within us. These are just a few simple things that we would recommend, but also if you have a yoga teacher, if you have someone you're working with the pranayama, some pranayamas you follow, please examine things in that particular context as well.
Good. There were a lot of questions that have been continuing to come in. It's we're a little bit over our 12:30 time. I think we'll take a couple of more questions and then we might slowly wrap this up. A question that came in early. The virus has a short incubation period. How can one improve one's ojas in a short period of time? I think we mentioned this before.
Yes, we did. Well, the only thing I would say, if the virus is close by, it's a question of strengthening, getting the ojas to move. You're not going to develop a stronger ojas quickly. So you do want to connect then with a greater pranic force in the environment. Again, have nice food for moving the ojas, for developing the ojas, but also again maintain the circulation. Again, these simple spicy things to promote the peripheral circulation. Many common things you use for the common cold or flu anyway. Kind of get your system ready in case it needs to act. So learn also how to mobilize the ojas with the prana. Pranayama also helps mobilize and move the deeper ojas that we have.
Good. And Anu from the Computer Society of India writes, "Hi Darshan, how long does the virus stay in our body even when cured? Does our immune system take a toll?"
So that, again, the virus, we're still learning quite a bit about the virus and even understanding, but the virus replicates and sort of sheds, they think 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks now. Some have said maybe some people longer, others shorter. But I think universally, I think I've heard the 2-week mark is sort of how long you are actively shedding virus. Again, the reaction, what causes just to be very clear, what causes the sort of some of the fatal consequences of the virus, or the more, is the body's reaction to fighting it. So it's not the virus itself, it's how we fight the virus. And that's when they call that cytokine storm. So it becomes a disproportionate response that all of a sudden creates a tremendous amount of local inflammation, particularly at local as it relates to the lungs, and sort of impairs then proper air exchange. And so people essentially lose their ability. That's why we see the panic around ventilators, because people are not able to oxygenate independently. And so once they become hooked onto ventilators, it's actually taking them quite a bit longer than what we would normally expect to wean somebody off of a ventilator so they could be breathing on their own again. So that's why there is this widespread public and sort of political panic around where are the ventilators. So again, I would say on average for the majority of people, remember, majority of cases are mild. And again, it impairs particularly people who have underlying health conditions, and especially pulmonary ones are the ones where people seem to be more at risk because already they have an impaired pulmonary function system, whether it's due to the already underlying sort of histology of the lung itself versus also the way people breathe. So I think as it relates to practices that improve I would again, I fully agree from just a fully unresearched, but I think certainly from what the wisdom traditions teach us, having practices that increase our vital capacity of the lung, total vital capacity, reducing sort of the dead volume of the lung are going to be important because it just gives you more lung to work with for oxygenation in case, if at any point, if you are afflicted by the virus, part of your lung is affected in some way or form.
Thank you. I think I'd like to take one last question. This is actually from an Ayurvedic practitioner who is also an immunologist in Brazil, and who is concerned regarding some of the information that's been spread on social media regarding many people, not just Ayurvedic practitioners, but practitioners from many different other types of complementary medicine, suggesting different herbal quick shots for boosting immunity, with the fear that people who are immunosuppressed may not benefit from this, and not providing any disclaimer. People may be desperate looking for miraculous cures against the threat of COVID-19. How can people assess recommendations of different herbs they might not understand and decide if that would have an important role for themselves, or if this is a good beginner just putting something on the internet?
We have to be careful, and it's best to consult a practitioner. It's also best to understand your constitution and your state of ojas or bala, your internal strength. I would say most of these herbal remedies are not very harmful. I wouldn't say they have a big downside. It depends a little bit. I mean, there may be some exceptions that way. Don't believe in panaceas. There's no panacea for anything. And don't rely on a one-shot item. Try to use the most integral and overall lifestyle recommendations that you have. You can also, if it's an herb, you can also research it on the internet quite easily and see what it is being used for. See who may be recommending this or not. But again, if you can, and then of course, if you do have a serious problem, or you're having symptoms, get a diagnosis before you simply start taking things, or at least, be careful in what you do. Many other people are thinking they need to, some people are also taking pharmaceutical drugs or other type of substances when they have the danger of the virus. We say, be careful. At the same time, a healthy lifestyle and common herbs should be okay, along some of the recommendations that Ayurveda gives in a general way.
Very good. Well, Dr. Mehta, Vamadeva, Dr. Frawley, This has been very informative for myself, and I'm sure for all of our participants today. And I'd like to turn over now to Kanchan Banerjee, the managing director of the Boston Center for Excellence, to remind the people who might have tuned in late about the upcoming programs. Thank you all.
Okay. Well, first of all, again, thanks a lot to Dr. Darshan Mehta and Vamadeva Shashtry ji, and special thanks to Dr. Jay Glaser for a wonderful session. The way you have actually taken the questions and moderated, that was really wonderful and a lot of learning for most of us. Those of you who are still online, I think there are a lot of people are still online. But in case you are not, this recording will be available by tomorrow. You will get an email from our system, our mailing, and so you can listen to it again later. And our channel, if you go to our channel, BoCE-Channel, you will see this and previous videos. One interview by Dr. Frawley before, I think last year, that is there also. So it's the BoCE-channel. And for future events, we also are on Facebook, BoCE, if you search, if you're using Facebook. But I just wanted to mention once more, next Saturday, coming Saturday, we're having a session with Dr. Satbir Singh Khalsa and Dr. Salini Val, and this is more about science of yoga and meditation. Dr. Khalsa is going to talk about how actually science plays, science behind these practices, who has been doing many research for many years, and also Dr. Salini Val, who's a professor of business, and she's going to talk about decision making, mindfulness, and especially financial stress we are going through today. Many people don't have jobs. So how do we keep ourselves mindful of what to do in this stressful situation? So Dr. Val is going to talk about that. And then the following week, as I have mentioned, you will have a session on creative arts in painting. Three artists from Boston area, Miss Lucinda Cooper, Gopika Narula, and Bandana Sharma. They're going to talk about it and demo and help us getting into the practice. So with that, thanks a lot again to all the participants from all countries around the world. Stay well, stay safe, and if you have any challenges, contact your local health service provider. And also, if you want to connect with any of the three experts today, Dr. Mehta or Dr. Frawley or Dr. Glaser, send an email to info@boce.org. And Dr. Frawley's website is, please mention the website that you have so much information. Is it vedanet.com?
Yes, vedanet.com. And you also have access with a fairly extensive social media. You can access that from there as well.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot again. You have a great rest of Sunday. If it is still Sunday, I think someone from Australia was there, so it's Monday. So thanks a lot. We'll see you next week.